Hello! This will be a demonstration of Proposition 8 from Book 8 of Euclid's Elements, which says that if between two numbers there fall numbers in continued proportion or geometric progression, then however many numbers fall such between our two given numbers, then so many numbers will also fall in continued proportion between any two numbers in the same ratio as our given ones. We're given four numbers A, C, D, and B. These will be in continued proportion, so that as A is to C, C is to D, and D is to B. Furthermore, we're given two numbers E and F, which are in the same ratio with A and B. So as E is to F, A is to B. And what we want to prove is that between E and F, we can stick the same number of numbers in continued proportion as we can between A and B. So what that means in sort of more common terms is that you notice that between A and B, we've put two numbers in continued proportion. We put C and D between A and B in continued proportion. And what we want to prove is that between E and F, we can put another two numbers between them such that the four of them together make a continued proportion. We're going to begin by taking four numbers G, H, K, and L, which will be the least numbers in the same ratio as A, C, D, and B. We can do this by Proposition 733, of course. We've seen this many times by now. So G is to H, just as H is to K, just as K is to L, all of which are as A is to C, or C is to D, or D is to B. And G, H, K, and L are the least numbers in the same ratio as A, C, D, and B. And because G, H, K, and L are a continued proportion in the least terms, right, we made it in that way in the previous step, then we know that the extremes, which are G and L in this case, are prime to each other. We know that by Proposition 8.3. So G and L, these two numbers are prime to each other. G is prime to L. Now, because with the four numbers A, C, D, and B, and G, H, K, and L, they all make the same ratio between each other, we can use Proposition 7.14 to say ex equali that the extremes are in the same ratio with one another. That is, that A is to B just as G is to L. So we're crossing over C and D, and we're crossing over H and K to compare directly the extremes A and B and G and L, so that we can form this proportion. A is to B just as G is to L. But we were given that A and B are in the same ratio with E and F as well. So we have two ratios which are the same with the same ratio, property of numbers, so that they're in the same ratio with one another. So G is to L just as E is to F. But we know, we proved this in step 2, that the two numbers G and L are prime to each other. And we know that prime numbers are the least numbers that hold a particular ratio with each other. So we can say that G and L are the least numbers that have the same ratio with E and F. And furthermore, we know by Proposition 7.20 that the least numbers in the same ratio with any two numbers measure those two numbers the same number of times, the antecedent, the consequent. So that what that means for us here is that G measures E the same number of times that L measures F. Now the next thing we're going to do, we're going to create two more numbers. We're going to create M and N, such that H measures M the same number of times that G measures E, and likewise K measures N the same number of times that G measures E, all of which measure the same number of times that L measures F. And because they all measure each other the same number of times that G measures E, the same number of times that H measures K, which is the same number of times that K measures N, which is the same number of times that L measures F, we can put these all in a proportion just by the definition of proportionality, definition 7.20, so that G, H, K, and L are in the same ratio with E, M, N, and F in that order. But we also know that G, H, K, and L are in the same ratio with our given numbers A, C, D, and B. We were just simply given that. So we have two ratios which are the same with the same ratio, property of numbers. They're the same with one another. So that we can say that E, M, N, and F are in the same ratio with A, C, D, and B in that order. And we know that the four numbers A, C, D, and B form a continued proportion. Again, we were given that, so we can reasonably conclude that E, M, N, and F also form a continued proportion. And we'll notice, finally, that between E and F, there are two numbers m and n to form a continued proportion, which is the same number of numbers between A and B, right? So there's two numbers between A and B that form a continued proportion, and we want to prove that there's two numbers between E and F that form another continued proportion, and we've just done that, which means we're done with the proposition, therefore, etc., Q, E, D. This is kind of a complicated one. Or I shouldn't say complicated, it's just very wordy and kind of windy, and the enunciation isn't exactly clear what exactly it's saying. So I'll just give a particular example with particular numbers to help illuminate what this means. So say we have the continued proportion 16, 24, 36, 54. 16, 24, 36, and 54. 16, 24, 36, 54 form a continued proportion. And say we have two other numbers that are in the same ratio, that 16 is to 54. So that would be like 40 and, what would that be? That would be 135, I believe. So 16 is to 54, just as 40 is to 135. And what this proposition allows us to say is that between 40 and 135, we can put two numbers between them that form another continued proportion in the same ratio with 16, 24, 36, and 54. And we can verify that that's true because we can form the continued proportion of 40, 60, 90, and 135. So 40, 60, 90, 135 form a continued proportion. And we notice that between 40 and 135, there are two numbers, just as between 16 and 54, there are two numbers as well. So we see that this proposition, of course, holds. That's all I've got to say about this one, so I'll end the video here and move on to proposition 8, 9.